One, everything, everywhere, all at once. It's getting to that point in the movie where it feels like everybody's in one room, reciting their lines of dialogue at the same time and descending into screaming, just chaotic, in unison, everyone screaming insanity. 2, 6 election scenarios, how this could play out. What if the blue wall holds? What if it cracks? What are the scenarios to watch for next Tuesday that could indicate who will be the next president of the United States? Checking in with 3 voters in Pennsylvania. On the road with David Marcus today on The Will Cain Show. It is The Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Always on demand if you're listening on terrestrial radio. By heading over to Apple or Spotify, hitting subscribe. That way the show will show up in your feed every day, right there on your phone. And while you're at it, leave us a 5-star review, if you wouldn't mind. Leave a comment. It always helps other people discover The Will Cain Show, and it allows you to become a member of the militia. The best place to do so in the comments section right here by subscribing on Facebook or on YouTube. Drop down into the comments, join the debate, and be with us every Monday through Thursday live at 12 o'clock Eastern Time. OutKick's Bobby Burack is going to join us today. He wants to break down different election scenarios. What if Michigan goes red? What if Arizona goes blue? Let's break down a couple of different possible, perhaps even probable scenarios that you could see unfold on election night. But first, let's get into everything, everywhere, all at once. Where is your port? I ask you, where is your port in the storm? How do you find sanity in an absolute storm and sea of insanity? Story number 1. It's getting absolutely nuts, and you know that. I hate to point out the obvious, but I'm going to give you an example. And from there, you and I can build out our lives. Everything you encounter on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour basis, and everything that scrolls across my screen. It's just getting more insane. It's getting less persuasive, and therefore a little bit like a knife who's lost its edge, but it hasn't gotten any less insane. Let me just give you Disney-owned, ABC's popular syndicated television series for decades on run. Let me just give you yesterday from The View.
All of you. Talking about you, it's us. He's not going to, say, oh, you're with a white guy, I'm going to keep you from being deported. No, he's going to deport you and put the white guy with someone else. The man is out there.
So that's Whoopi Goldberg suggesting that should Donald Trump become president, he's going to break up interracial marriages, deport your spouse, and force you to marry a white guy. I'm serious. It's delivered with seriousness, passion. I mean, she's suggesting, despite the fact that you and I, and we all have lived through 4 years of a presidency of Donald Trump, which should just sort of be, it should just sort of give us all the ability to laugh at this in America. This is what is brought out. This is what is, forget allowed. This is what is highly compensated media in 2024. And it's not just that. I mean, I don't know how many contracts my former colleague at ESPN, Jamel Hill, has scored so far from big corporate media, but I believe the latest is from TNT. And no sooner did she score what I'm sure is a 7-figure contract than she tweeted out this weekend, blaming America's problems on white guys. She said, considering what they said about you as a woman driver and what Trump stands for against women, this is unhinged behavior, but good luck. Also, this is why people do not trust white women in this election. Actually, that's her going after Danica Patrick and white women. It's just the icing on the cake, because she also tweeted this weekend that literally America's problem is white men. She has no problem expanding any critique of an individual or America into one particular ethnic group. Just open. I mean, really unrebuttable racism. The only way that someone could even get away with making a argument that it's not racism to say it's impossible to be racist against white people. But I guess that's the viewpoint of TNT. Warner Brothers owns TNT. I don't know. I can't believe this is where we are again in 2024. Well, Jeff Bezos, the owner of the Washington Post, seems to have all of a sudden, I don't know, decided he doesn't want to take part in the insanity. Washington Post declined to endorse Kamala Harris. That's led to multiple resignations on the editorial board, open mutiny within the Washington Post. So the owner takes to the pages, and Jeff Bezos writes an article about why he doesn't think the Post should be endorsing any presidential candidate. But in the article, he talks about, let's be real for a moment, because he says, in a really, I think, great line, reality is undefeated. So let's be real. America doesn't trust us. They don't trust the media. And the polls are well known. Anyone can see the polls and what they have to say. I think as an institution, as an industry, the approval ratings are under 20%, in the range of 20%. Trust and credibility. So Bezos says lack of credibility isn't unique to the Post. Our brethren newspapers have the same issue. And it's a problem not only for media, but also for the nation. Many people are turning to off-the-cuff podcasts, inaccurate social media posts, and other unverified news sources, which can quickly spread misinformation and deepen divisions. The Washington Post and the New York Times win prizes, but increasingly, we talk only to a certain elite, and more, we talk to ourselves. He says, I will not allow this paper to stay on autopilot and fade into irrelevance, overtaken by unresearched podcasts and social media barbs. Not without a fight. It's too important. There are suggestions that Bezos will expand the ideological spectrum of the Washington Post. We'll find out if that's true. But I do ask you, I am curious, what's your port in the storm? We're 2 weeks out. We're less than that. We're a little over a week out from an election, right? And it doesn't get any more insane than it does right now. Like, if there was something reported today, forget skepticism. I think it's well-earned cynicism. At this point, even a video, I don't know, in the age of AI, everything is insane and everywhere is everything all at once. So what is your port in the storm? Where do you go? I'd like to think here, although you know I have a point of view and you have some bias, I have some bias. We all have bias for that matter, but at least there's an honest effort at attempt to arrive at the truth. But this is one show. Where do you go? It's necessary, because I do think Bezos is right. We have to be able to analyze and see and understand reality, because reality is undefeated. Oh, there's short-term victories. There's short-term victories in Never Never Land. But ultimately, reality is undefeated. So where do we go anymore to understand, to see someone accurately described, to do their best to be true in reality? I don't even think anyone's trying. I don't think anyone even really cares, because, hey, I'm not sure there's business in reality. I'd love to know. Right there. Comment section. Will Cain Show. What's your port in the storm? Election scenarios 1 week from now. How do we know which way it's going on Tuesday night? Let's break through some scenarios. Let's play with the map in the race for president. Next on the Will Cain Show. What if the blue wall holds? What if the blue wall cracks? How does it all play out in the race for president? It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe at Apple or on Spotify. Bobby Burack is a columnist at OutKick.com. He joins us every so often. We usually work through a mailbag. Feedback from you, the Willisha. But today, Bobby, you're interested in talking about scenarios, different, essentially, ways the game could play out. You want to go to the telestrator and talk about what's going to happen in the race for president.
All right, so just for some background on this, I've brought seven different map scenarios about how the Electoral College could play out next week, a week from today. And for the skeptics that say the polls are all fake, they don't mean anything, I would just say this. I understand your skepticism, but if you don't believe any of the numbers, there's not a whole lot to talk about. So these maps are based on current averages from Real Clear Politics and some recent trends. So we're going to start with just the basic map one, as you put up there. And this is the map filled in for all 50 states, but the 7 swing states. This is how you win elections now. So to recap, the 7 swing states are Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. There is some talk and some predictions that Trump could flip Virginia and New Hampshire. I don't know, Will. I don't buy that totally. I wouldn't rule it out, but I'm still expecting these 7 battleground states to determine the election. So essentially, Kamala starts out. What?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, are you going to run through all 7 maps, or how do you just so we don't talk over each other? Like, what is this going to be? Is this you're going to run through all 7 maps here at once?
Yeah, I'm going to pull up different maps and I'll break
That's
it down.
That's not going to work. That's not going to work. No. All right, so I'll have a conversation. I'll go back to you every once in a while to throw these maps out. So there's some conversation about Donald Trump going to New Mexico. It is those 7 swing states. Those 7 swing states. But he certainly spent time in New York. He's also going to New Mexico. So do you think it's all possible it's more than those 7 states?
Not really. I think if you look at recent trends, it's very unlikely that he or Harris are going to flip any that are not considered a battleground state. If Trump is to, I think it'd be New Hampshire, which is really only worth 4. And at that point, if he wins New Hampshire, that would suggest to me he's probably going to win Pennsylvania, which is right below New Hampshire. So even if he does, I think it would just add on to a pretty solid victory for Donald Trump. And I think, Will, the point that a lot of people are missing, just because the polls are razor thin, that does not mean the election is going to be razor thin. Dan, if you can put up map 2, this is the current Real Clear Politics map. And as you see, it has Trump winning 6 out of the 7 battleground states. That's a pretty comfortable victory. But, and this is the concern for Donald Trump, what if the margin of errors are wrong in the other direction? Because right now, all 7 states are separated by between 0.2 and 2.1. There's a very good chance that the polling errors are consistent with 2 years ago, which would mean a clean sweep for Kamala. So I think the election is unpredictable, but it won't be all that close. It's just a matter of who wins comfortably.
So this is the landslide election scenario. Dan, let's put that back up. So this is Trump wins all of the battleground states except for Michigan. And even at that, he's almost at 300 electoral votes. That is Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and Nevada. Now, this idea that there's a landslide really only goes in one direction. There will be no Kamala landslide. There's nothing to indicate. There is a potentiality, a scenario for a Kamala landslide. The question is how probable is the Trump landslide?
No, I disagree with that. Dan, if you can put up map 4, which would put Kamala at 319. So when we go back to the current polling, if you say the margin of error is 3, if the margin of errors are consistent with the midterm elections, which were 2 years ago, Kamala would win all 7 battleground states. So I think that a landslide victory for her is just as likely as a landslide victory for Donald Trump. I think both of those scenarios are more likely than a 4-3 breakdown either way.
No, I mean, so that's Kamala winning every blue wall. That's her winning North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona. Every election that has involved Donald Trump has involved Donald Trump underpolling. James Carville has said the only way you can project a Democratic win is if you're up by 5, okay? There is no state in the Real Clear polling average where Kamala Harris is currently up by 5. At best, she's up by 1, say, in Michigan or Wisconsin. So this scenario that you laid out for us right here, I just don't see the Kamala Harris 300 electoral votes. I mean, like Tucker Carlson said on Sunday in New York at Madison Square Garden, there's just no way to believe. There's no evidence. There's no poll. There's no nothing to believe this is a potentiality for Tuesday night.
I wouldn't. Well, I'm going to have to push back on that. I wouldn't bet on this scenario, but what happened 2 years ago? The polls underrepresented the pro-abortion, pro-choice vote. If that happens again next Tuesday, we're looking at something pretty similar to the one up on the screen. I remember 4 years ago, Biden had a very similar map, except North Carolina. He won 6 out of the 7. So I wouldn't bet on this scenario, but I certainly wouldn't rule it out. If it's Saturday and this is the outcome, I don't think it would be that much of a stretch.
Yeah, I do. I don't think that's on the table.
Okay.
All right. What else do you have?
All right. So, Dan, let's go to scenario 5. This is an interesting one. So this is Kamala holding the blue wall, and this puts her at exactly 270. It doesn't fill in the other 4 swing states of Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina. Doesn't matter. At this point, she would have 270. Here is, I think, the concern for the Trump campaign. The blue wall, those Rust Belt swing states, have voted as a unit in every election since 1992. We have no evidence that they are going to vote independently. It just doesn't happen anymore. However, they've gone blue, hence the blue wall, in every election but 16. So recent history
meaning Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania always are lockstep with one another?
They have been since 1992. 1988 was the last presidential election that there was a crack in those 3 states.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, if Kamala wins those 3, as Democrats have in every election since 92, the election is over. Donald Trump does not have a path to victory. The inverse, which is the next map, and Dan, if you can put that up, shows a repeat of 2016 where Trump flips all 3, which would put him at 263. At that point, he would just need to win North Carolina, Georgia, or Arizona. So in the most simple terms,
right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really hard for anyone who is not watching on YouTube or Facebook. Anyone listening on podcast or anyone listening on radio, this is incredibly hard to follow, and I apologize for that. But this is, let's just cut through it. So first of all, those 7 states is an accurate analysis of what matters on Tuesday night. Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada. There's your Sun Belt states. And then your blue wall, your northern states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Right now, Bobby, if we're trying to characterize what it looks like, the Real Clear Politics polling average, which is the only thing that we can truly trust because you don't want to put your trust overwhelmingly in one polling outfit, shows Donald Trump leading in all of those. And even if he's not, and I don't have it in front of me on where it's updated today, even if he's not, it is, to my point earlier, it is 5 points better than where Joe Biden was for Donald Trump. 5 points better. Joe Biden was up +5. At best, Kamala Harris is up 0.05. But the issue is if Donald Trump wins all of his Sun Belt states, he still loses if he doesn't get one of the blue wall states.
That's exactly right. He has to win at least one of the blue wall states. My prediction is he's either going to win all 3 or lose all 3.
Yeah. That's your prediction? Win all 3 or lose all 3?
Yeah. There's no evidence that there will be a crack. There hasn't been since 1988. I see a lot of map projections have a crack. Well, there's no evidence of that. I would expect all 3 to go in one direction. It's just 50-50 which direction it goes in. Kamala's strongest state of the 3 is Michigan. Trump's strongest is Pennsylvania. But again, they're all within the margin of error. So it's hard to get much of a read on it right now.
Trump's is Pennsylvania. Do you think the joke about Puerto Ricans is going to hurt him in Pennsylvania? There's 500,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania.
It's hard to imagine that any smart voter would change their mind because of a comedian. It wasn't even Donald Trump. But when things are this tight, I don't discount anything at all. It certainly wasn't an advantage for Trump. I don't have more confidence in him. The 24-hour polling since then has actually only shown him lose ground in Michigan. This morning, Kamala jumped him in Michigan per Real Clear Politics. Pennsylvania has not changed much since Sunday. Now it is early. Maybe by Friday we'll have different results. But as of right now, I'm not too concerned about that.
So outside of that, most people on the right feel a great amount. They feel, and it's hard to quantify feelings, a significant momentum towards Donald Trump. But you don't see that in the numbers. You don't think that's bearing out right now.
I don't. I just think that Democrats have such an advantage because of the Rust Belt. George Bush was able to overcome that because the map was different in 2000 and 2004, and he was able to win in Virginia. I don't think that Trump's the underdog per se, but I think when you look at the map breakdown, it's hard to look at him with too great of confidence because, again, no Republican has won those 3 states but him 4 years ago. All recent history suggests that Kamala is the favorite in those 3 states.
All right. I guess we'll find out next Tuesday night. What do you?
Yeah, I want to make one more point on the polling errors. So the 5-point error was right 4 years ago. Remember, in 2016, the polling errors were closer to 8 and 9. So there was a 4-point correction. So I don't buy that these polls are off 5 points in Trump's favor. If they are, it's probably closer to 2 or 3.
All right, let's. I began the show, Bobby, talking about what Jeff Bezos is doing at the Washington Post. He's seen well, first of all, why do you think these newspapers, the Washington Post, but it's not just the Washington Post, the LA Times, the Minneapolis Star Tribune, and others have declined historically, and this is a huge aberration from the past, to endorse Kamala Harris and Tim Walz?
I've talked to not a lot, but a good amount of newspaper writers and former newspaper writers. Their read is that these billionaire owners, whether it be Bezos or the doctor who controls the LA Times, they're expecting Trump to win, and they don't want to start off his presidency as an enemy of his. I don't know if to me, I don't know if that checks out. I don't know why they would care that much. But I love Bezos' op-ed last night saying that people don't trust us anymore. And by endorsing Kamala, all we do is convince them that we're more partisan than we want them to think we are. So credit to Bezos. He could have caved, even though he's a billionaire. A lot of billionaires are cowardly. For him to stand up and say, this was the right decision, this was my decision, props to him.
Do you think the Washington Post will make a move to actually not just decline to endorse presidents, but to be honest, pivot back towards some sanity?
I think they'll try. I remember CNN tried when what's his name? Jeff Zucker left and they hired Chris Lick. CNN tried to pivot towards the middle. And what happened? The newsroom, the commentators, the reporters, they had an uproar and they started leaking stuff to the media and eventually pushed Chris Lick out. I think he could try, but I certainly think in order to do that, he would have to clean house. I think Chris Lick's biggest flaw, and it wasn't his fault because he wasn't able to do it, but he didn't get rid of enough of the bad faith actors by the time he took full editorial control. So for Bezos to execute a pivot towards the middle, he's going to have to get rid of almost all of their columnists and almost all of their reporters because they don't want to be a moderate news organization. They want to be the MSNBC of print.
You'd have to do an Elon Musk style of like believe that you could still put out your product with a totally skeleton version of the staff, that everyone would convince you that you can't. You would. How are we going to put out a newspaper tomorrow? Because you're either going to fire or everybody's going to quit. And that would scare every other owner, but it doesn't scare Musk. And you'd have to have somebody like that and say, okay, and you're exactly right about CNN. Like the cancer is so deep that you would have to have somebody brave enough to go, I actually don't need 3/4 of you. So if I lose you, I'm still going to be able to put out my product until I can restaff it with people who are sane.
Yeah, and I think the Post, if they were willing to, and Bezos has the resources with a $205 billion net worth, he could restaff this thing with a diverse newsroom as far as worldviews and have a really interesting and articulate and educated paper. But again, you either have to clean house or risk everybody quitting. And there's no better time to do that than now because they lost $77 million. The paper's not profitable. They needed big changes anyway.
Yeah, and I wonder what the play of Elon Musk is with Donald Trump. Like, is there really going to be a Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE? Is he really going to give Elon Musk a position to come in and, I mean, talk about inefficient, talk about a industry that could do away with 3/4 of its workers and do just everything it's doing now just fine? That would be the federal government. But I do wonder. I wonder the same thing about RFK. Like, what would RFK's actual role be within a Trump administration?
Yeah, I mean, the health, I think, is one of them. I think he's actually one of the leading voices about actually.
Yeah, but doing what?
I don't know. I mean, there's so many
like what,
roles
head of the CDC?
I would say that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's so many roles here. I don't know if any of them are real, what they actually mean. I tend to think a lot of people are just being paid to have titles and not do a lot. But those two people are fascinating. I think one of Trump's greatest accomplishments is that he has turned some of these former Democrats into supporters, whether it be Musk, RFK Jr., or Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, those are three people that I think I align pretty closely with on several social issues. And for him to convert them, I thought it was really impressive. And one of the knocks I had about Trump in 2016 was he wasn't very good at convincing people who didn't like him to like him. He's done much better at that this time around.
Yeah. All right. And the last thing I want to talk to you about, Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa wears this Make America Great Again hat at the end of the 49ers Cowboys game. I'll be real with you, Bobby. Like, this is something I said back, I don't know what year it would have been, 16, 17. Colin Kaepernick had the right to make any point he wants to make, except when it's on his employer's dime. In other words, while he is an employee on the job location for his employer. And at that point, then the employer has the ability to say, hey, not here, not while you're on the job. And the analogy I used to use this on ESPN, is the Walmart checkout counter person, they can't expect to wear a Make America Great Again hat. I use the analogy in reverse, right? And that Walmart's going to be cool with it. So here I think we have that analogy playing out in real time. Now, the Niners and the NFL haven't said anything that I know of about Nick Bosa wearing this hat. But if he were in some way punished for wearing it, it would be the same standard that we talked about in punishing Colin Kaepernick, to me.
Well, I disagree, because Colin Kaepernick was disrespecting the national anthem all season long. And it became a movement that cost the NFL double-digit viewership year over year for 2 straight years. Nick Bosa wore a hat for 2 seconds on a post-game show. Those crimes, those thought crimes, aren't the same. One is far more egregious and disrespectful and bad for business. Now, if Nick Bosa hurts the NFL viewership, and then maybe, okay, you want to make a stand, but I don't think he will. And, a big difference.
You're totally right, but I mean on the principle. I would. But I don't think they're equal. And you're right, business is business, and Kaepernick hurt the NFL's business. And that, in the end, is why, he hurt them more than he helped them with his play on the field. That's why he's not in the NFL. But on the principle, because when we did this with Kaepernick, everybody talked about First Amendment, this and that. The point is, on the principle, this is why it wasn't right for Kaepernick, besides the business calculus. And by that same principle, you could make that argument against Nick Bosa.
But to me, Kaepernick wasn't punished because he violated some rule. He became more of a headache than his play made up for. So I didn't want Colin Kaepernick punished, but I agree with owners. Hey, this guy's a distraction. He's a headache. And he's not very good in the football field. He would be benched for Blaine Gabbert. So, no, I don't want either one punished. To me, it's not all that different when players wore BLM, because BLM doesn't actually mean Black Lives Matter. It represents a pretty Marxian political organization now. And you can still wear Black Lives Matter on the back of your helmet. So, no, I disagree, because I don't think Kaepernick was punished for his politics. I think Kaepernick was punished because he was no longer worth the headache.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, in the end, it's all business. I guess it would go like this: if enough left-wing viewers of the NFL were so offended they were willing to turn off the product because of Nick Bosa, and by the way, I don't know, hundreds of other players in the NFL started wearing "Make America Great Again" hats, and it inspired a revolt among the fans and the viewers, then it would be an apples-to-apples comparison.
Well, kind of, but there were other players who protested after Kaepernick. Again, he was not a very good player at the time. While that would be a problem for the NFL, if I'm the 49ers, I'm willing to put up with that because I think Nick Bosa might be the best defender in the entire NFL, maybe after TJ Watt. So if that was the case and it became a movement and it hurt business, I wouldn't begrudge San Francisco for getting rid of Bosa, but I don't think they would because of how important he is as a football player.
All right. We'll see how the election scenarios play out in one week. OutKick's Bobby Burack. Thanks for breaking it down for us today.
You bet.
All right, we've got David Marcus on the independent voter in Pennsylvania. Maybe they'll get a little insight into whether or not that blue wall holds or cracks next on the Will Cain Show. All right, so OutKick's Bobby Burack says that the blue wall has never been broken, meaning Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan always go together. So let's see if we can get some insight into which way that's going to go by checking with the independent voter in Pennsylvania. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. David Marcus is a Fox News columnist who's been traveling across the country. He's checking in with us every week. Last week he was in Pennsylvania. I think you've been in Pennsylvania again some more this week. Is that right, David? More Pennsylvania? Which, I mean, look, man, that's what it's all going to come down to, it looks like. No, it's Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and I'm not leaving. This is it. This is the ball game. I'm in Philly right now. Philly's the ball game. I mean, Philly is Kamala's Alamo. She needs to hold this. She needs so much turnout in Philly to overcome what even John Fetterman describes as the excitement for Trump and the rest of the state. So, Philly's a very, very big deal.
So we just had OutKick's Bobby Burack on. He pointed out, I believe it's since 88 or 92, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania have always sort of gone together in lockstep. No candidates picked one off or the other. So if whichever way Pennsylvania goes as you're picking up there, it's obviously a very big indicator of which way Michigan and Wisconsin would go as well. And if Kamala, for example, holds all three, that's the election right there. So what are we feeling this week in Pennsylvania?
Look, everything is trending in Trump's direction in Pennsylvania. Everybody who I've spoken to, even in Philly, who are Democrats, mostly, I'd say almost everyone I've spoken to believes that Trump is going to win. Last week we talked about, how much like you as a Cowboys fan this week, I imagine that people don't want to look at the sports page when their team loses. That vibe has only increased. And honestly, one thing that's interesting is like there's less buzz. I saw a poll the other day that kind of struck me as accurate in terms of what I've seen on the ground that said that fewer people think that this election is the most important election of their lifetime than 2020. And I kind of feel that. It's the level of emergency that I think both campaigns and to some degree the media are trying to like sell us. It's a little overblown compared to what's actually on the ground.
Huh. Interesting. So fewer feel like it's this existential moment in America than they did in 2020. Well, so does that mean there's a little less enthusiasm or motivation to turn out? And if that's the case, I'm sitting here thinking through that. In a place like Pennsylvania, I actually think that would work in Donald Trump's favor, right? Because if you're being sold he's a Nazi and this is the end of America and this is the last Democratic election, but you're not buying it, maybe you're more apt Maybe not to vote for Donald Trump, but stay home and not vote in Pennsylvania.
Look, I think the Nazi stuff is backfiring really badly. I said this on Friday, and then on Monday you saw the biggest super PAC that Harris has come out and say, guys, this isn't working. Nobody believes it who didn't already believe it. Getting a couple of guys from his administration to say it is not new breaking bombshell news to anybody. I suspect that later today or tonight, when Harris speaks at the Ellipse in D.C., that rhetoric's going to be toned down significantly compared to what we saw last week. In fact, I think that her campaign may now regret having that at the Ellipse at all, because it's so backward looking, right? The whole message of having it at the Ellipse is, hey, remember January 6th? Wasn't that awful? It's not landing, and I think they're kind of stuck with the message if they're given the speech there.
What about the Puerto Rican thing, David? You're in Pennsylvania, so there's 500,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania. Is the story 450,000? So, Tony Hinchcliffe makes a joke at the Madison Square Garden rally. There's at least, in my estimation, David, in my anecdotal experience, there are some Puerto Ricans very upset about this. We can debate the should or shouldn't and whether or not, that you should have a thicker skin. But I'm just telling you, in New York City, I picked up, hey, this really makes me upset. So I don't know, is that, with 450,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania, is that joke a problem for Donald Trump? It looks like we're having
I mean,
technical
that
difficulties.
happened so recently that I haven't had a lot of, I haven't really, I've,
I think we're having some technical difficulties with David. His internet's going in and out in Philadelphia. I guess they don't have good internet in Philadelphia these days. I think he may call in just a moment. But, that's a big number in Pennsylvania. That's a big number, 450,000 Puerto Ricans. And I don't know what percentage of those are legitimately upset about the outcome of that joke and if it affects them on how they want to vote. Randy Edgar over on YouTube says 79% believe economy is the top issue in 2020. Believe it is the economy. In 2020, it was healthcare, followed by Supreme Court, COVID. And these issues, crime, immigration, not as strong as they are today. Technical difficulties, says on YouTube, appropriately named. Just prep her to win. The election system is rotten. Tony Martinez says past results are not a guarantee of future performance. Perhaps talking about, the projection that the blue wall has never broken. Rita Keel, even if 10,000 people were polled, the crowded Trump rally should speak volumes for themselves. Yeah, but the problem with that, Rita, is we saw similar rallies in 2020. All right, I think we have David Marcus back on the phone with us right now. You there, David?
Yes. Sorry, charming hotel, but not the best Wi-Fi in the world.
What's going on in Philadelphia? I thought they had Wi-Fi. I thought we had internet in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Well, we also have a quarterback in Philadelphia who's actually good. But all right. Stop knocking on Philly. No, listen. You asked me about the joke at the Puerto Rican joke at the thing, and this is one of those stories. I was very surprised to see sort of like CNN hammering home on this morning, and sort of other outlets really trying to make a big deal out of this. I could be wrong. I don't. This is not the kind of thing that I've seen resonate with voters, especially because it wasn't Trump who said it. And there's also just sort of like a built-in, there's a lot of stuff that just gets baked in to Trump, right? Like off-color jokes, things like that. Like people have expected for years and years, there's going to be one moment where that's it, the country's fed up. It's not happening. If he's going to lose, it's going to be by dribs and drabs, not by some kind of there's a picture of him on a boat with a woman thing like happened to Gary Hart. That's just not going to happen.
Is there such thing anymore as a as a deal killer? Like, is there a story? What is the maxim in politics? Never get caught with a dead girl or a live boy.
Right.
But
No,
like outside of that, is there anything anymore that kills someone's campaign?
I think it has to literally be criminal, right? So yes, I think like if you commit a crime, but I don't think there's anything below the level of crime. And I mean, look at plagiarism. It's like everyone's a plagiarist all of a sudden. You're just like, what is going on?
Wait, David. Let's go through this. What are the things that have killed campaigns in the past? Plagiarism killed Joe Biden in, what was it, the 80s or early 90s, right?
Yep, the picture of Gary Hart on the boat.
Exactly. Gary Hart and infidelity. That was a deal killer back then. Obviously not anymore.
Edwards.
A simple, silly scream killed Howard Dean, right?
Yes.
There's none of that would do the trick now. None of it.
No, and I think part of that has to do with the fact that the parties are so much more divided now that sort of influences the fact that, like, on both sides there are a lot of people who are willing to just hold their nose and say, like, it doesn't matter, I just can't let the other side be in charge. And that's a fairly prevalent attitude. It's like, I think on both sides you have people who aren't so much voting for as they're voting against. I would suspect that's a little less so in regard to Trump voters, but both sides certainly have them.
So, David, I don't know if we're going to talk to you again before next Tuesday. I think we're going to talk to you during it next week. And I know you've got a week to go here, but I mean, look, early voting's begun, obviously mail-in absentee voting. Which way is it going to go in Pennsylvania?
I'm not going to answer that question because I did that last time and it didn't go well, and there are people who are still angry at me. What I will say is that over the past week and continuing through right now, all of the momentum everywhere, blue areas, red areas, seem to be moving towards Trump, which is obviously a good sign for Trump. The past couple of weeks, there have been two bells that I've been ringing, a thing to keep an eye on. It's union voters and Gen Z. I have a column coming up. I don't know if it's up yet, but it'll be up today at Fox Digital about some Gen Z guys who I met here in Philly. And it's different, man. They're different. They're not, and they're fed up. So it's something to keep an eye on. Are those Gen Z voters, and then also those union voters, and we'll see, man. It's going to be close.
If you're a fan of Donald Trump, David, you're much more optimistic than it sounds like Bobby Burack was a little bit earlier here on the Will Cain Show. 7 days to go. We'll see. Always appreciate you checking in. You're an optimist. Good. It's better to be an optimist. It's a better life. All right. Thank you for checking in, as you always have throughout this election cycle. Look forward to talking to you next week, David.
Thanks, man. Be well.
Okay, you too. All right, that's going to do it for me today here on the Will Cain Show. We'll be back again, same time, same place tomorrow, 12 o'clock Eastern time. And we've got a big schedule next week. As I mentioned, I'm going to be on the road in a diner on Election Day, 2-hour show. By the way, that show is going to start at 10 a.m. Eastern time and carry us into our regular hour up to 12 o'clock. So next week, that's why you need to subscribe. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube, and then join us live on Election Day, 10 to 12 Eastern time, live with the people on the ground in North Carolina. I'll see you again next time.